In this first video, we are going to discuss our first basic sorting algorithm, which is the selection sort. The idea or the premise behind selection sort is fairly straightforward. If we have a collection of items and we want to sort those items either in ascending or descending order, what we can do is we can find out what is the smallest or largest element in that collection and repeat this process until the entire collection is sorted. So let's say if we have a collection that consists of some fruits that include an apple, a lemon, and a watermelon here, what we are going to do is we are going to sort this collection by the size of the fruit. So in this case, lemon is the smallest. We move lemon into its correct position. Next, we find the next smallest, which is apple. We move that into its correct position. And then we finally have just watermelon left in our collection, so it will automatically be assigned to its correct position based on our implementation details. So technically we are repeating this process of finding the smallest or largest element size minus 1 times because the last element will already be at sorted place. So let's take a core example here with an array and let's try to see how selection sort passes look like at every iteration. So we find out what is the smallest element in this array, which is in this case 10. Now what we are going to do is we are going to swap this minimum element at its correct position, which is the first position. So we technically swap these two and our array would look something like this, which is 10, 29, 14, 37, and 13. So we are keeping a track of the positions in an outer for loop, which we are just going to see. But the key idea here is that we have two loops. The first one is keeping track of this position, which is we are just increasing this position at every iteration so that we know at which place the swap will occur. And the second for loop is keeping track of what is the minimum element in, like, let's say these numbers, or what is the minimum in these ones, what is the minimum in these ones, and so on. So again, after first iteration of our pass, the array would look something like this. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with passes technically means that you go through an array at least like once. So one pass means that you have gone through entire numbers in the array once. So after one pass, this is how our array will look like. After second pass, now we will see what is the minimum number in the remaining elements. So out of these, 14 is the minimum. So we swap it with the second position. So the next pass would look something like this, which is 10, 14, 29, 37, and 13, as you can see. Next, we are going to again find the minimum in these elements, which is now the minimum is 14. Since it's already at its correct position because we have to move that to the third place, our next pass would look something like this, which is there won't be any swaps, but instead we'll move to the fourth pass. So in the fourth pass, we'll find again the minimum out of the remaining ones. So this time 29 is our minimum. So we are going to again swap it with 37. So at the end of the fourth pass, which is like if we have 5 elements, they are going to be like 4 passes because we don't need the last pass because that last number will automatically be sorted by default. So that's how generally like selection sort works. So let's try to discuss the pseudocode of the selection sort and then we'll look at the actual C++ code. So this is a pseudocode. We are running the outer loop that is again keeping track of this position, or it's keeping track of which place the swapping will occur, and the inner code, which is this inner code, is keeping track of what will be the minimum element in the remaining elements. So this is what essentially it's doing. I would like you to stop the video for a second and think about this code, how it's working on. And I'm going to discuss the C++ code along with an example on how this is actually running. So you initialize the position min to a variable called fill, which is keeping track of the outer loop. And next you start the inner loop from fill plus 1 because we want to check what is the minimum elements in the remaining one. And if this element is less than the position min, which is this particular loop is basically keeping track of what is the minimum element in the remaining elements, then you exchange some values, or you swap the values based on after this inner loop, you will find out the correct position of the minimum element, and you are going to exchange this element, which is the position min, with the one at fill, and you repeat this process again and again. So just discussing the time complexity first, like how would the time complexity of selection sort look like? So since we have two loops, one inside another, the inner loop is keeping track of what is the minimum or maximum element in like n elements. At the second iteration, it will be like n minus 1 elements and then n minus 2 elements and so on. But technically, if you evaluate the complexity of this selection sort pseudocode, it will look something like n into like n and n minus 1 plus like n minus 2, which actually evaluates like the total time complexity of the pseudocode will evaluate to n squared. So there's a quick tip here, like sometimes when we evaluate like sorting algorithm, we check what are the number of comparisons and what are the number of exchanges that are going to occur. So when we are talking about comparisons, the comparisons will be on the order of O of n squared. And why that's the case is because we are going to compare like this number with this one and then this with another one and so on to find out what is the minimum, and then we are going to repeat that n times. So technically our comparisons are growing at O n square, but our exchanges would be O n. And why that's the case is because once the inner loop is keeping track of what is the minimum element. So at every iteration we are just doing one swap, like only one swap or one exchange is happening. So that's why the exchanges will be of the order of O of n. So this sorting approach which we just followed is a quadratic sort, and it's not that time efficient. But the only good part of this is it does not require any additional memory. So we are sorting in place, we don't require a new array. So that's why the space would be of the order of O of 1. So let's discuss the selection sort code. Here I have an array and I have the size that I've provided to the function. You can find the entire code at this link along with the caller code, which is the main and other passing variables. So here I start my outer loop from 0 to size minus 1, and technically it has to run till size minus 2 because again the last element will automatically be sorted, so we don't care about the last element, we just care about till the second last element. Next, I have a variable here that's keeping track of what is the position of the minimum index, like it's just keeping track of where the swap should be occurring. So here we have the minimum index position, which is I, and the inner loop, what it's technically doing is it is comparing if the array element at the position for like I plus 1 and then I plus 2 and I plus 3, is that less than array's minimum index. If that's the case, we just do a swap and find out the minimum index of the remaining elements in the array. So if that's the case, then we are going to swap the two positions, like which is the minimum index 1 and the outer index which we have, which is like I in this case. We are going to swap those two. Otherwise, like we just keep on iterating, and once we are done, we go back to this outer loop and repeat that for the passes. So the outer loop is keeping track of passes, and the inner loop is keeping track of the minimum element. Or let's say if you want to just swap this with the largest element, you can do that too with a few changes in the code. So I'm not going to go over trace this program because it's an easy one. I'll discuss the more complicated ones, which are merge sort and stuff. But if you want, like, try it on a piece of paper, this should work fine with a small example. Like, let's say if you have some numbers like 1, 11, 15 and 2, 0, like how would these passes look like? Also, the total selection sort time complexity is of the order of O of n squared in the worst case. In the average case and best case, it's also O n squared, because we still have to, like, to find a minimum element, you still have to traverse through the entire array. So that's why, like, All three time complexities will be of the order O of n square. The space complexity will be O of 1. And in the next set of videos, we are going to discuss our other two basic sorts, which include bubble sort and selection sort. Thank you.